And so today we have Michael Bonini, Director of Office of Public-Private Partnerships, the P3 program, to cover P3 updates. This is a massive public-private partnership to help maintain bridges in the state of Pennsylvania. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Bonini, Director, Office of Public-Private Partnerships of the P3 program.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm having trouble with the video feed, but I got the presentation up, so that's it's probably the most important thing. So thank you for the opportunity to give you a little bit of information on our P3 office and on our upcoming and active project that we're working on and getting ready for procurement, which is the Major Bridge P3 initiative. So, whether you're in the cozy confines of your office or working from home today, or, even at some obscure pavilion at a park somewhere on a nice Friday afternoon, thanks for joining. And, hopefully I can shed some light on public-private partnerships and what the department is doing with the Major Bridge project. So just to set the stage, I just wanted to spend a few minutes on background information relative to what is a public-private partnership. And the way we define it at the department is basically it's just a contractual agreement between the public sector agency, so the Department of Transportation, and private sector entities. And it's typically to do activities or perform activities that normally would have been done or are being done by the public sector. But in this case, the department or that public sector agency is willing to work with a private entity to ultimately do something to improve the transportation system. So we have a really broad definition. As long as it's a transportation related project, service, or facility that's being improved through a contractual agreement, those can run the gamut from design activities to construction, into financing projects, and I'll come back to that in a moment, and then potentially even operating and or maintaining, in this case, department assets. The financing is usually the piece, though, that differentiates and calls to attention public-private partnerships, because what it is the opportunity to leverage private investment at a time like this in 2021, where transportation resources are very, very limited, and we have more needs than we have, financial resources available. And so departments of transportation or public sector entities have to understand that P3s are a tool that can be in their toolbox for delivering and improving the system. And part of that is leveraging financing and money up front in exchange for long-term payments. And so the responsibility of any given asset or service or project is transferred over to the private sector for a defined period of time. And our P3 enabling legislation permits us to transfer something over for a period not to exceed 99 years. And that's a pretty long term. Some of our active projects, the maintenance term is either 20, 25 years, and that's typically where DOTs land. In exchange for the transfer of the responsibility of those particular activities for a defined period of time, the private partner is receiving payments from the public sector entity, so from PennDOT, to enable those activities to occur. And so it's just a contractual agreement where a private sector firm is coming in to aid the department in either designing, constructing, financing, operating, or maintaining any given service, facility, or project in exchange for payments for a defined period of time. In the case of what you see on the screen here, this was our flagship project, the Rapid Bridge Replacement Project, where we replaced 558, smaller, low volume bridges across the Commonwealth through a DBFM contract, where our partners at Plenary Walsh Keystone Partners are now once those bridges have been constructed by a multitude of teams, both, primarily from the Commonwealth here, including DBE supported activities, but now they're responsible to maintain those bridges for a period of up to 25 years. And so P3 models really run the gamut. A lot of the work and activities you've heard about earlier today, and deal with the traditional ways of delivering projects through design, bid, build activities. But public-private partnerships then run a variety of different gamuts that dictate, and illustrate what a degree of private sector involvement would be. And obviously, the greater the private sector gets involved in the activity, the higher risk that's transferred over to that entity, and usually at a cost. And so that's sort of a determining factor from our end to understand if we transfer activities over in a P3 model and we transfer the risk over, the department or any public sector agency just has to be aware that transfer of risk comes with a price. And so if the department or that agency is willing to accept that and pay for that risk transfer, then P3s are a very suitable method for delivering improvements to the transportation system. And you can see we kind of break these out into, design build projects. The P3 really gets into the design build finance and higher on the chart here. The DBFs are projects where we're looking to improve a service or a facility today in exchange for finance payments over a shorter period of time that doesn't have the maintenance term on it. And so we have a project right now up off of on Interstate 81, right outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, 7.5 mile stretch, where we're pursuing a design build finance. We're looking for a team to come in and replace the interstate in that 7.5 mile stretch right outside of Wilkes-Barre, and also to replace, up to about 8 bridges in that. Again, the department has no interest in turning over the maintenance responsibilities and the winter operations for that, since we have maintenance forces in that area that can handle those activities. But what we are looking for is for someone to come in and assist in the financing component of it to help us stretch our dollars. We'll pay that over a shorter period of time. And then as you move up the continuum here, you get into sort of the DBFM model and an operate and maintain model to complete privatization. Our enabling legislation does not permit complete privatization, so that's something that isn't happening in Pennsylvania on the transportation system, only because the department is never allowed to not be the owner of any given facility or service, even if someone else is responsible for it. And so, to kind of put it all together, we look at about 6 pieces of, 6 ingredients if we were baking a cake in order to determine whether or not public-private partnerships is a worthwhile delivery method. And, they're listed here, and it starts at the top, at 12 o'clock. Do you have the enabling legislation in order to permit the transfer of activities to the private sector through a P3? In Pennsylvania, there is a transportation-related P3 law in effect, but there are not any provisions for anything other than transportation. So in other states, there's a lot of social infrastructure type public-private partnership deals out there relative to building and maintaining prisons, schools, hospitals, improvements to colleges and universities. They're not able to do that under a P3 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, though they may have other means to do that. But we really are focused, obviously because we're the Department of Transportation, on transportation improvements. It's got to be a complex problem. If it's not a complex issue or need out there, the department can typically handle that, either through the delivery of our traditional program or even under our maintenance regime. But really, we're looking for complex issues that would enable the private sector to come in and not only help assist in the financing of a project up front, but to bring private sector innovation to the table and maybe perform activities that we typically don't do because we have limited resources. The department goes through, an exhaustive financial feasibility analysis to determine if there's a benefit into proceeding with a public-private partnership. And so, as ideas come in, either from the department or from our unsolicited process, we run either high-level or detailed level analyses and feasibility studies to determine, is there merit to this particular project? Community support is another key factor. Ultimately, between that and number 5, understanding the environmental impact, we have to understand where we are in the process. The P3 doesn't give us the ability at all, nor do we want it, to circumvent any environmental clearances or approvals. We still need to go through the regular processes, and we just need in the P3 analysis to determine, are we already through there, or are we, working our way to a point in certain time? And then at the end of the day, the department or any public sector agency needs to fall back on, stable long-term revenue. And that is to say that the department needs to have the ability to pay back, and the private sector is looking for, the assurances of either the motor license fund or the general fund or something attributed to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that says, hey, if we invest up front, that agency, that Department of Transportation has the financial resources to pay the project back over a period of time. And, fortunately, with the motor license fund, even as strapped as it is, it does give us that opportunity to participate into public-private partnerships, because we have the motor license fund sort of set aside for transportation-related services. So with that as a background, what I'd like to do is actually segue into our Major Bridge P3 initiative and just give you an overview of the project, where we are in the process, and what's going to happen next, because this is the next public-private partnership project that's going to be in active procurement. Our Rapid Bridge Replacement Project is in the maintenance term because we've built all 558 bridges. We have a transit CNG project where a private partner is helping us design and install CNG fueling stations at public transit agencies. That's in process right now, where we've got the majority of those stations built. The Partnership 81 project is down the line a little bit further this year, but really what you're going to see as a focus, and what has been a focus, if you've been paying attention to any of the news relative to PennDOT, is the Major Bridge P3 initiative. And so what we are trying to do through this project is to complement or supplement our regular traditional bridge delivery system with the delivery of interstate bridges through a P3. Again, as been cited multiple times, the department has an annual funding gap of about $8 billion a year to maintain and improve our state-owned bridges. And so, even though we've got a dedicated motor license fund, and people say, well, why am I paying into the gas tax? It's still not enough to maintain our system of over 25,000 bridges, 40,000 miles of roadway. Not only then to, that excludes the 70,000 miles of municipal roadway that are also out there. Pennsylvania is a big state, and there's a lot of water. And because of that, we've got a lot of roads, and more importantly, or just as importantly, we've got a lot of bridges. So what we wanted to do with this project is look at alternative funding mechanisms to deliver these projects through a P3. And so it is our anticipation, and when we presented the project to the P3 board in November of last year, we cited that our position on this is that we were going to pursue the implementation of user fees for the travelers of those particular assets, so that they were paying into the system. And then through the imposition of a user fee, the department can continue to pursue our normal traditional bridge delivery program, because if we had to put these 9 bridges in this case in our program, it would wipe the program out, and it would take up the entire program such that we wouldn't be able to deliver any of these other improvements. And so the thought was, as we're struggling to identify long-term financial solutions to help us improve these bridges that were built in the 50s and 60s with the Eisenhower administration, now to bring them up to a state of good repair and a state of mobility, safety, and capacity, suitable for this century. We need to figure out a different way to procure these things, and user fees is the first of an alternative funding solution, or a series of solutions that we're going to be looking at long term. So, shown here on the slide are the 9 bridges throughout the Commonwealth that are included in the Major Bridge P3 initiative. Together, they're anticipated to represent a total project size in terms of construction of around maybe $2.2 billion, with the I-83 South Bridge and the I-95 Girard Point Bridge being the largest construction projects in the program. Most of the other bridges, or all of the other bridges, their expected construction costs are anticipated to be anywhere between $40 and $200 million. And then you've got Southbridge and Girard Point, which are way higher than that. So, we have a lot of information on the bridges. You can find it online at the individual candidate bridge websites, or on the P3 webpage. We've done a few industry presentations, and we've identified and outlined additional information. So if you were on PennDOT's website and went to programs and projects and programs and projects, and worked your way to public-private partnerships, you could access more information on each of the bridge locations through that particular website. Additionally, we are working feverishly within the department to prepare a request for qualifications that's going out to industry very soon. I'll get to the schedule here in a few minutes, but you could stay tuned for that as well, because we anticipate much more information being provided in the RFQ when it hits the street this month. So the goals of the program are pretty simple. One, we want to accelerate the renewal of these major interstate bridges today, in the next few years, as opposed to having them compete for limited financial resources. We want to enhance public safety. Obviously, if we can build a bridge or redesign and rehabilitate a bridge or replace the bridge today, that's going to enhance public safety. And I should note, of the bridges, let me go back here. It's anticipated that 8 of the bridges are full replacements, with the exception of E, which is the I-95 Girard Point Bridge. That's going to be a rehabilitation at this time. There may be some replacement activities down the line, but for now, that's a more of a rehabilitation as opposed to replacement. We want to avoid costly detours due to either weight restrictions or closure of bridges that may have to come if we're not able to address these bridges within a defined period of time. And we know the sensitivities around that. And these are bridges in key corridors and on interstates, so we're trying to avoid that at all costs. And lastly, we're looking to try to create a financially sustainable model for these particular bridges on interstates and expressways. These are 9 of 25,000 bridges, so it's not the department's intent to impose a user fee on our entire system. But in this case, for these particular bridges, we think it's maybe one of the best ways to deliver these bridges today and continue to deliver the rest of the transportation program. So driving our project are a few key principles, and these were articulated to the P3 board, and we've continued to articulate these guiding principles to industry as well, so that they are aware of the department's intent. But we're only looking at major bridge replacements. We're only looking at the 9 bridges out of the 25,000. We have the ability through federal and state legislation to apply a reasonable user fee that focuses on cost recovery for our construction activities, and then for the operations and maintenance of those particular bridges. We're looking at trying to identify a development entity that will work with the department in a pre-development agreement to then figure out the best way to deliver these bridges. And so the RFQ, or the request for qualifications, that I've alluded to, and I'll show you the schedule here in a few minutes, is going to help us and onboard a pre-developer or a development entity that's going to work on through a pre-development agreement with the department. But that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is down the line once we get through the environmental clearance and the preliminary engineering and final design activities that have to occur for each of the bridges to determine how we're going to package them. Not all of the bridges, in fact, it's quite the opposite. We're looking at trying to identify a vendor that's willing to work with Pennsylvania contractors and teams within the Commonwealth to deliver these bridges. So there's going to be performance limitations on the team that's awarded the project. And then we'll have to make a decision with the developer how we're going to procure the rest of the bridges. And right now that's still something that we're working out, whether these are going to be individually procured or bundled in smaller bundles, but we want to make them attractive to, local participation as best as possible. The bridges are geographically balanced across the Commonwealth. And one of the things that we're really focusing on here is equity, and we're going to work hard to mitigate against any disproportionate socioeconomic impacts with the delivery of these particular bridges. And so as we go through the environmental clearance process, be it NEPA or a NEPA re-eval, that's a key driver in this, is ensuring that there's equity in the process. Some of the benefits of pursuing a major bridge P3 initiative, the way we're anticipating, one, it gives us the ability to try to pilot a new funding stream, i.e. the user fee that is not reliant on current gas taxes. I was just thinking through, I was trying to figure out a way to clearly articulate when COVID hit last year, traffic volumes went really down all over our Commonwealth, and they're slowly picking up, especially on the trucking side. But passenger vehicle traffic is down, and because of that, we lost a lot of money that was coming into the motor license fund. So it was sort of an unintended consequence of everyone working from home or working remotely. Was the lowering of the monies coming into that motor license fund. So what we're looking at here is trying to identify that funding mechanism that's an alternative that could be used to support these bridges in and of themselves. So we're looking at trying to find a way to deliver these bridges without touching the motor license fund at all. Now, maybe we have to dip into it initially to start the project up and onboard and go through that process. But at the end of the day, we're running traffic and revenue projections right now and diversionary studies to ensure that these are the right bridges, and we're going to be able to have the bridges pay for themselves at the end of the day. And if they can't, the secretary has articulated that those bridges won't be included in this. And so right now we're at 9 bridges. It won't be any more than that, but it may be less than that. We've just got to go through and run the numbers and really understand that. And again, the timing, we want to leverage private equity investment. We want to leverage low financing rates that are out there through, federally funded programs like TIFIA, or the use of private activity bonds to deliver the bridges today in an accelerated fashion, so that we don't have to have them compete for those limited resources down the line. Additionally, through the P3, we envision having a dedicated revenue source that would, again, keep us from having to divert regional monies to replace these bridges. The department has an interstate TIP, transportation improvement program, where monies are set aside for this, but we wouldn't be able to take care of other interstate needs if we had to replace these bridges. And then, and I mentioned this earlier, the P3 gives us the ability to leverage private sector innovation. There are things that are happening in other states and through the private sector that we could leverage through a public-private partnership. So it gives us that ability to leverage that and bring those techniques or innovation activities into the Commonwealth. And then at the end of the day, this is all about sort of sustainability and making sure that the Commonwealth is best suited for businesses as they come in through, and they're looking for locations and that sort of thing. If we have a solid transportation system, ultimately Pennsylvania and the Keystone, everyone that lives in the Commonwealth benefits from that. with a strong transportation network. And so, I made reference to the fact that we're looking to onboard a developer. Here's a snapshot of what it looks like. We have been doing industry outreach events since the project was approved by industry. I'm sorry, by the P3 board in November of last year. And, we've held events just to understand concerns and challenges that public-private partnerships bring, but also to hopefully to educate folks on the benefits of that. We've spent the last 3, 4, 5 months really trying to understand the best scope for the project so that this month in June, we can release an RFQ, or request for qualifications, have those submitted or responses submitted in July so that we can go through the process of identifying a team of shortlisted vendors that would then, have the ability to proceed and respond to the final RFP that we anticipate putting out on the street later this year. Again, only those shortlisted teams would have a chance to participate and respond to that. You can see on the schedule here, their responses would be due early next calendar year. And then we want to work through 2022 to, onboard the team, go through the final design activities, see what environmental activities have to occur, work together to do that, to start to deliver some of these bridges as early as hopefully 2023. You can see on the back end, and this talks about DBFM packages 1, 2, and 3. Those are just for illustration purposes only. There could be 9 packages. There could be, 2 packages. We're just not sure. There's going to be more than one. We know that. There's going to be self-performance limitations that are going to be put on the developer. They're going to have to come to the table and show us how they're willing to work with local contractors and local subcontractors as well. And so as we get through that process, we envision a lot of outreach with DBE firms, because this is a federal project. And once we get the shortlisted teams done, probably in the fall, where we're going to try to do matchmaking sessions and hold those outreach and meet and greet and networking sessions so that those opportunities down the line can occur. When we shortlist the teams, we're really looking at the equity and construction leads with some design activities, because we want to onboard those teams and identify them quickly. But then as they have to put the rest of their team together to respond to the RFP, that's where we see a lot of opportunities to provide some of those networking sessions and work in some of the best practices that Kathy and her staff work with every day through the Bureau of Equal Opportunity, and bring that community to the table for those opportunities. So with that, this is our anticipated procurement schedule. We are the plan is to release the RFQ this month. Today is June 4th. So, we've got, 26, 27 more days, but, the sooner we can get the RFQ on the street, the sooner we can start the process, and the closer we are to replacing these bridges. Again, looking at the P3 model, what we're doing here is giving us a chance to consider all of the elements in project delivery and operation and the risks associated with each, and then really trying to understand who's in the best position to manage those risks, if it's the department or the private sector. So properly allocating risk, like I mentioned earlier, is definitely a major benefit of the P3, which helps us hopefully lower costs and accelerate projects. So, we've got to take in considerations for design, where we are in its schedule, right away, utility, permitting, all the things that happen in a normal program. Those same challenges are inherent in a P3, but working together in this pre-development agreement, we think we have the opportunity to, again, work with a partner very closely to mitigate these risks as best as possible. So sort of wrapping up, again, our major bridge project was approved by the board to use a design, build, finance, and maintain model of P3 delivery for the replacement of up to, replacement and or rehabilitation of up to 9 bridges on our interstates. We're looking to develop a program that's financially solvent through the implementation and, user fees. So hopefully we don't have to rely on the gas tax or the motor license fund or any outside sources. We're looking at trying to develop a program that, again, replaces these bridges without taking money away from other regional projects. In fact, there's the possibility of complementing or supplementing additional regional projects down the line with the user fees, should these bridges be able to pay for themselves sooner rather than later. And again, we're looking to work with industry to enhance the overall P3 process based on lessons learned and best practices that are occurring in other states. Virginia, Maryland, Florida, Colorado, Texas, they've delivered many projects like this. And we think we have an opportunity through this public-private partnership to do the same. And so with that, I do thank you for your time today. Happy to stay on, answer any questions, or I'll make this presentation available to the ProRank team. And, that way you have the contact information for me, which is on the screen here. Feel free to contact me or, BEO, and we'll definitely work to answer any questions as we move forward, mindful of the fact that we are going to be entering into an active procurement once that RFQ hits the street this month. But anything we can do to assist and make contacts with, it's fully our intent to do so.
Thank you so very much, Michael, for your presentation and that information.
This is Kai Robinson from ProRank. What I'd like to do is, if there aren't any other questions, I'd just like to take a minute to thank Michael, Daryl, and Kathy for their participation and their presentations in today's events on behalf of PennDOT. I think it was very helpful, very informative. And, through the use of the rebroadcast of this event, I think that it's going to help to inform a lot of DBEs about pertinent information. So thanks again for your participation in today's event.
All right. So please look out on our website for copies of this presentation. Our contact information is now on the screen via email and via website, or you can call us. Okay, so we look forward to your participation. We look forward to being connections with you on ProRank Academy and working with you closely. So on behalf of the DBE Supportive Services Center and the DB Supportive Services Center, PennDOT, and ProRank Business Solutions, we thank you for your participation today and see you at the next event.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out today.